Okay. Um, I think I always knew I wanted to be an artist from a very young age. So I always had this need to create. I was always making stuff, and I loved art at school. And secondary school, I was really, really lucky. I had a really great art teacher, and he was a ceramicist. So we did an awful lot of clay work. And I just loved working in 3D. And I thought it really inspired me, the thought that people can view the piece, view something you make from different angles and see something different from each angle. And it just really, really spoke to me. So I kind of thought that's what I'd end up doing. And then I went straight from school to art college, to the National College of Art and Design in Dublin. And I fell in love with metal. I had never worked with metal before, and I was just really excited by it. And I liked the fact that I could work quite intricately, almost even using jewelry making processes to create these, really detailed work, and build it up into a 3D piece. So that really, really fascinated me. And then in my final year there, I had the opportunity to go to the hangars in Dublin Airport. And it blew me away. I just, seeing this room, massive room full of these huge aircraft, and some of them, they'd be stripped down to, like, they had everything taken out of them because they were being repaired. And to me, they just, like, they look beautiful, but vulnerable at the same time. And I had never really thought about them in that way. I'd always just seen them as a mode of transport, but then I just suddenly kind of saw them in a different light. And even the scale of them, and the engines, the jet engines, which just, to me, just seemed so beautiful. And I came away from that thinking, I have to do something with this. And it's really what kind of led me to what I do now. I just really wanted to express how I felt and what I sensed from them that day. So yeah, that's kind of it.
That's really wonderful, because it's really unique what you do. So I just always wanted to know what inspired you, what got you into it. And it's really beautiful. You found inspiration from an airport, which is a very unlikely place, actually.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about your works then and what they mean to you?
They're all, to me, they're a celebration. They're a celebration of man's achievements from, the early pioneers of flight, when they were like pushing boundaries to create these flying machines when everyone else said this was impossible, you're crazy. They had this belief. And I really feel like, I wanted to highlight that celebration about flight that I feel is kind of lost now. I think it's kind of taken for granted. It's just, you get on a plane to get from A to B. And I think you miss out the fact that, hey, you're in the sky flying in this metal object, and it's pretty amazing, Right. So I really wanted my work to be a celebration of that, the celebration of the ingenuity that the early pioneers of flight expressed. They were different, and they were pushing boundaries. And I think they're a little ode to that. And some of the work is much more, it's clearly more like reminiscent of a plane, and other work is more a sense of a plane, like what I would imagine maybe drawings of Leonardo da Vinci from flying machines, or early inspiration of what planes could look like, before we got very technical and almost, boring, I suppose, in a way, when it comes to things like that. Just a bit of a kind of what if we could fly, and we weren't bound by, engine, I can't think of the right word, like we weren't bound by things having to work, just playing with your imagination.
Right. I think it would have been a very different world if scientists, especially who made these things, they were given more freedom and more opportunities to work on it.
Exactly, yeah.
So, well, it is evident in your work that you're inspired by human marvels, especially transportation like boats, planes, and rockets, even satellites. So, is there something you aim to communicate through them otherwise?
I guess it's just that feeling of excitement you get, when you see a rocket launched, that kind of energy burst, or like for me, when a plane takes off. I just think marveling at how far we've come. I know that there's a lot of bad press about, airplanes with the environment, but I still think they're an important part of our development. I still think they need to be celebrated for how far we've come. I think it's a great thing what we've achieved with them. I think it's exciting that you can fly and discover parts of the world that before you couldn't, and how much it's opened up the world. And yeah, I just really think I want them to communicate excitement and joy in life, in keeping on discovering new possibilities, and curiosity. It's a sense of curiosity about the world and what we can do, and appreciation of things that maybe we do take for granted. Those little moments of when a boat speeds off, that sense of freedom that you get. Yeah, that's important to me.
That's lovely. So, inspired by aircraft and water transportation as a child, as expected, obviously, have you ever considered taking a career in something relevant besides art?
No, I've always kind of felt the need to be an artist. I think maybe the only other thing would be if I could do something with boats, like just spend my days, on the water. But I feel happiest when I'm making, and if I'm making something that kind of reminds me of those feelings of freedom when I am, say, on the water, or doing something like going on a plane, or I I just love creating. I really, really do. And I had long breaks from it in the past, and I always felt like there was a part of me missing, and that's why I feel so grateful now to be doing it, because it's like day and night when you're not making it. It does feel, for me, it feels like I'm not really being myself. I'm kind of hiding parts of myself, or I'm not really 100% happy. So I can't really imagine doing anything else. I think in some shape or form, I'd always like to be making.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So your works require intricate details and tiny parts, which I've noticed with little designs on it, which is a very difficult work, I understand. So it contributes to what I feel looks like a very functional model. Have you considered creating a working model, or do you plan to experiment differently in coming future?
Not so much a working model, because I feel in the past I have tried certain types of planes, and I feel like I get bogged down in trying it for it to be too specific, because a lot of what I do, I let myself be led along the way. I don't stick too rigidly to, like, I will do a drawing and I have an idea at the beginning, but I don't stick too rigidly to it. I allow sort of change to come in as I work. So I don't think I'd enjoy making something that had to be a certain way. I think I'd lose that sense of freedom that I get when I kind of don't always know really how something's going to turn out, and I love that excitement. So I don't think I'd like to lose that by sticking to something more rigid.
Okay. So working with metal can be difficult, and the fact that you work very fine details, as I mentioned earlier, it's very time consuming and very challenging. Might make some mistakes, I feel. So how do you acquire and prepare your materials, and what process do you follow for sculpting?
Well, I use very, very thin sheets of copper, um, which I love. And my mom, who's since passed away, but years ago, she took classes doing copper plaques. And whenever she got on very well with her teacher, and he agreed to give me any offcuts or any work that didn't work out, or if there was mistakes. So I had all these stacks of plaques that had mistakes on them, and I've just repurposed a lot of them. And it's a beautiful type of copper because it's thin, but it's still quite strong. So it can take a lot of heat and hammers, which it gets plenty of. So it's strong but flexible. So I would use a lot of them, and some of them do have a bit of pattern on, which I try and keep because I feel I like having that connection to my mum. And then I use some old kind of metalworking techniques to create texture, like processes like granulation, where you create these little balls, you melt down your metal and create these little balls and solder them on. And then I would use a lot of heat to shape the metal. Being honest, the copper is the star for me. It really leads me with the work because I allow it to kind of show me what it wants to do, if that makes sense. Like sometimes I will create a beautiful color with the torch, but I never get too attached to that because it can change. And it's sort of a case of just being open to what happens. And I just sort of layer up my work because the metal is so thin. I use the layers of detail to also create strength within the piece. So it's an awful lot of work for each layer, but it just feels right, because the work, it's almost like the opposite of the pieces the pieces I make are quite mechanical and strong, but I'm trying to highlight their fragility and their kind of vulnerability. And so they're made up of, very, very fragile pieces all joined together in different ways. So yeah, it's very much, I guess, being led by the metal and trusting the outcome and not being too rigid with a set design. And if I, create a texture or a part that doesn't work for one bit, I always hold on to it because it can be the springboard for the next piece. Sometimes that's just what sparks is a piece idea, is seeing a piece of metal that I didn't use in a previous piece and just liking something about it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. So what I understand is that there is this communication between you and the material that you're using, and through that communication, you come up with a design.
Yeah.
Okay. So compared to your other works, I've noticed that the work Botanical Accent, it's like a plane with a flower on the end,
Yeah.
floral and element. So can you tell us more about it and how you deliver the concept of combination of natural as well as the man-made objects?
Yeah, well, with that, with all my pieces, I suppose I try to offset the mechanical side with more kind of to soften it, And I feel the best way to do that is probably taking inspiration from nature. And I particularly like propeller engine planes, and I figured the sort of best way to soften that aspect would be to change the blades to petals. And then I kind of, the wings are sort of like a marshland with little sprouts of shoots growing out to really kind of, I suppose, that one is probably one of my more surreal ones. I kind of imagine a different world almost for something like that. So that just has the sort of essence of light, but equally it could be some sort of a character or, some sort of a machine. Just enjoyed playing around with offsetting mechanical with natural man-made or natural, the environment, So yeah, it was just a kind of a real surreal sort of fun piece, that one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed looking at it because it was a very beautiful clash of nature as well as the man-made objects.
Yeah, and it's almost sort of like, because planes do get a bad rap about their damage to the environment, is there a way for them to kind of get along a little better, I suppose?
Yes. So how has the art industry treated you as an emerging sculptor, and how has your experience been so far?
Well, initially, it was quite intimidating sharing my work because I had taken such a long break.
Mhm.
Um, Getting back into it, you're putting yourself out there because it's very personal, has been difficult, but also very rewarding. The art world, I think, has kind of opened up a little bit more with um, Instagram and, being able to show your work yourself online. Um, Being able to chat with yourself, even that's fantastic. You couldn't do that years ago. And
Mhm.
so generally it's been good. I feel in a way it's probably been difficult throughout lockdown and that with working in 3D because a lot of the online exhibitions, well, all the exhibitions were online. So it's quite hard to have your work represented in 2D, when it's 3D, it just doesn't show it off as well.
Yeah.
So I find that quite hard. Um, it seemed like, when I'd enter online exhibitions, it was always just a 2D image, which I'm not sure that it came across that it was a sculpture, So
Mhm.
from that point of view, it was hard. But equally, I was grateful for those opportunities that they were there. And, I feel my confidence grows the more I do share. I think it's important to have good support, and I feel like I have a good support on Instagram, a good community of fellow artists, and we all kind of encourage one another and comment, which has been really, really lovely. I didn't expect that, it's a really unexpected bonus. I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, right. So what I understand is how long has it been for you in this career now?
Well, I'm only back at it now about 2 years. Yeah, 3 years it'll be. Yeah, now 3 years.
Okay.
But within that 3 years, it's not been, I've not been all guns blazing from the beginning. Took a while to kind of find my feet again and find my confidence again, and taking sort of baby steps to get
Hmm.
going and creating the kind of work that I want to create.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's been good.
That's nice. So what have critiques and collectors said about your work? Have their views affected your work in any way?
Well, I suppose you're always, even if no matter how confident you feel, you're always thinking, oh, will they like it? And I
Yeah.
have been, I have been surprised and pleasantly surprised by the feedback. Um, it's been very encouraging. Um, I feel, I always take on board constructive criticism, but I have been lucky with receiving good, uh, you know, criticism or good feedback, and I suppose it's hard to ignore any kind of feedback, but I have been lucky in that overall it's been really, really good, which has been what I needed, I suppose, when you're starting out and you're kind of second guessing yourself, why am I doing this sometimes? Because it is tough.
Yeah.
I've had, really good feedback, and from people that have bought, good feedback as well, which is, you're always worried until it's handed over, and that it's gonna go well. And I've, been very lucky that way. It's all gone. So, everyone's been quite happy. So it's great.
Right. That's really good that you've been getting really sweet feedback, because they're really the works that you make, they're very beautiful. They communicate so much about freedom, as you spoke earlier. So yeah, they're just
Well,
beautiful, intricate objects.
oh, thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's not like, I mean, there have been things that I have entered and not um, gotten into, like, certain exhibitions, but I guess you just have to not take those things too personally, because there's so many talented people out there. You just kind of trust your time, it's not
Mhm.
meant for you this time, or not take it too personally, and just keep doing work that if I'm fully happy with it, like I wouldn't show it unless I was you know, if I was kind of doubting it, I wouldn't show it, you know. I
Hmm.
think you answer to yourself ultimately, your
Yeah.
own standard.
Yes, right. So your works follow a metallic color palette, from rustic pink to blue and probably even brown. So what role do these colors play in your concept for a sculpture?
Um, I rarely choose the color before I start. In the case of the learning to fly piece, I very much knew I wanted it to be blue, which would mean that I would use a process called patination, where you're speeding up the natural oxidation of copper. But generally, I allow the metal to do what it. I trust that the color is going to be right, because along the way, because I'm constantly heating and quenching the metal, you get these beautiful colors along the way, and I think, oh, that's gorgeous. But I don't have any illusion that it'll stay, because the next time I solder, it changes. So I really have to trust that the color I end up with is the color I want. And then there are, you know, a few little tweaks that I'll do, and I'll shine up certain areas to kind of highlight parts of the piece that I want to sort of show off or clean up. But generally speaking, it's a case of handing it over to the copper and saying, you know, do what you need to do. And I just always trust that it won't let me down, and it hasn't so far. So I
That's
think it's important for me to be in the right headspace when I'm working as well. I can't come in stressed, because
mhm,
then things don't flow, you know.
mhm. Right. And what challenges do you face currently in the art industry?
I suppose the biggest one is getting myself seen and selling, you know, on a ongoing basis. Because as I said, like, there's so many talented people out there. There's so many artists, that it's hard to kind of be seen. And I suppose my work is quite niche. I don't often know, I don't always know that I found my place yet, or that I've kind of found the right market to be in. I kind of fall between the cracks in some ways of, you know, it's hard to kind of describe my work sometimes. So I do find that can be difficult.
Mhm,
Finding the right market, speaking to the right people, you know, to get myself seen and out there, and also not being too pushy, because it is a personal thing, you know. It's not a, I don't have that kind of business head on me to kind of promote myself maybe in the right way sometimes. So yeah, I think that's probably the hardest part, and working alone too, you know. I always was used to working with people, and so I suppose having, it's good to have support and people to talk to, and you know, that's difficult. That can be difficult, you know, because you're talking to yourself
mhm.
someday. So,
Yeah, right. Right. So, how do you envision your future as a sculptor?
I would love to be doing more physical exhibitions. You know,
Hmm.
one day I'd love to have a solo show. I'd love to exhibit internationally, you know, even if it was online. I'd really like that. Just to have a bigger audience, you know, to kind of put myself out there a little bit more, out of my comfort zone. Um, yeah, I'm also kind of, the next thing I'm sort of exploring is maybe more hanging pieces. I was always interested in mobiles, you know, like the artist Alexander Calder. I love the idea of working a bit more with balance. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I've a few ideas like that, coming
Hmm.
up, and sort of exploring that. And yeah, just build up momentum around my work, and really try and promote myself a bit better.
That's good.